So you're starting your flux core class. Excellent. Now, there's a couple other videos you need to watch before you get in here, and that is checking the end consumables on your machine, how to string the wire up, the rollers, these feeders, how this stuff works. So here's the thing with flux core. It is literally a hollow wire that is full of flux. So it's brittle, it breaks, it's dirty, it's slippery, and it's different than MIG welding. And even though we use the exact same machine, the S350 Power Wave, with dual feeders, this side is regular MIG wire, this side is flux core. Even though the machine is exactly the same, they have deemed it different enough that they call it two separate welding processes. So the things that you learn in MIG welding, be careful, because you can really mess up with flux core welding. They do correlate, they use the same machine, they use the same equipment, but they are very different wires. So first things first. In the other videos you saw how to check the end consumables on your gun, how to make sure the wire is fed through from the bottom and not from the top. Okay? You're going to come into your booth with a welding procedure or a print that's going to tell you what wire to run, amperage and voltage ranges, and what type of gas to use. So, we're going to talk about two different kinds of flux core. One is gas shielded or dual shielded flux core, and the other one is self-shielded flux core, and they're very different. So come on over here and look at these labels. The first thing you see is the UltraCore 71A85 is the dual shielded or a gas shielded, it says it right there, gas shielded cord wire. That means even though it has flux, we still have to use gas to run it. Now if we switch to inner shield NR211, this is a self-shielded cord wire. That means we use no gas with it. It will not run correctly with gas, and this one will not run correctly without gas. So the first thing you need to do is identify the wire. Make sure if you're gas flux core welding, make sure you have gas shielded or dual shielded wire. So we walk in, we check the label on the roll. If it doesn't make sense, ask your instructor. But we look on this label and I can see it is the 71A85 dual shield. Now this particular flux core can run on a lot of different gases, but I'm also going to run my gas line into my 7525 gas. Some flux cores run CO2, some flux cores run 7525, some flux cores will run any of it. So you got to make sure what wire you have on here and what your procedure says for the type of gas. So the first one we're going to talk about is flux core, gas shielding. We've got the gas on. I'm going to bring you over to the machine in just a second and show you how to set it up. But one thing to note on these gas shielded machines, if you look at the knurling on the rollers, we use those because the flux core wire is slippery, and those are like little traction grabbers. They grab the wire and feed it much easier and smoother through there. So ask your instructor for some knurled rollers if you're welding with flux core. The difference with flux core and solid wire is we can crank the adjuster down on this pretty hard. It's solid steel. This isn't. If it's slipping in the rollers and we crank the adjuster down, it'll crush the wire. It'll squish it. Fill your liner full of flux. It won't feed right. It's just a bad thing. So the knurled rollers are very important. So we're going to come down to our control panel here in just a second. And we're going to turn this machine on, power button, and you come right into the control panel here. And as I said before, this is a very sophisticated machine. There are 527 different programs this machine's capable of. For gas shielded flux core, it's very simple. There's only one, maybe two. But let's turn this back to one. Waiting for it to boot up there. This is for stick welding. Stick welding. Touch start TIG. Nope, we're not doing that. Nope, we're not doing stick pipe. Self-shielded flux core. Now remember, we're not self-shielded flux core welding, we're gas shielded flux core welding. So we're going to go one more. It says gas shielded flux core. The G stands for gas shielded. Very simple. The S stands for self-shielded. The G stands for gas shielded. And those are the only two programs on this machine for that. So we're going to go gas shielded flux core. And now up here we have our voltage, we have our amperage, wire feed speed. Voltage, electrical pressure, amperage, wire feed speed directly correlate. The more I turn the wire feed speed up, the more the amperage comes up. Now remember, this power supply and this feeder talk to each other. This feeder is always on, so even if I grab the other gun, it still has power to it. Make sure you have the correct gun. We want to know what size wire you're running, gas shielded or self-shielded, what type of gas to use. So I know that this is gas shielded 045, 45 thousandths wire. I'm using 75-25 gas, and I come in and find my program, and I start with adjusting my wire feed speed or my volts. Now this is not in synergic mode like the last video we did on gas metal arc welding. So I want to start somewhere. Geez, how do I figure out where to start? Where do I set these things? I have no idea. Yes, you do. You just don't know it yet. That information will be on your welding procedure. Your instructors have put those things together, and they're going to give you a procedure that says voltage should be, it's a range, 22 to 25 volts. 23 to 27 volts. Wire feed speed should be 240 to 300 inches per minute. So start at the bottom of the range with both of them. If you're going to use the bottom of the wire feed speed, use the bottom of the voltage. You don't want the voltage all the way up and the wire all the way down. Get this stuff set in really good. Test your welds, but here's one thing to not forget about flux core welding. When we MIG weld, we always push the weld, whether we're doing pulse, spray, or short circuit. With flux, you have to pull the weld because it has slag. Just remember this. If there's slag, you have to drag. You cannot push flux core. If you push flux core, it'll cause lots of problems. Embedding flux in your weld is one of the big ones. Loss of fusion, loss of penetration, lots of things. We always pull flux core. Now, there's one more important thing to talk about with the self-shielded wire. Everything is the same. The rollers are the same. We don't need gas. We can shut that off because it's self-shielded. It makes a lot more smoke. It's a lot more sparky. Metal's flying everywhere. It's a lot less friendly of a welding process. It's kind of like stick welding, only the electrode is on the wire. Here's the big difference though. If we come down here and look, when you are gas shielded welding, this machine is running in DC positive polarity. The only way to switch this machine to DC negative polarity, which is the only time we switch it to DC negative, is to run self-shielded flux core. Right now, I have the ground clamp is negative and the power supply, the gun, is positive. So in order to run self-shielded flux core, we have to change the ground clamp to positive and the power supply to negative. If you don't change the polarity and you're running self-shielded, it won't take you long to figure out something seriously wrong. So just remember, find the diameter of the wire, the type of gas you're going to use, come find your program, set your amperages and your voltages up according to the procedure that you're given, and these run pretty much the same except for gas shielded runs positive polarity and self-shielded runs negative polarity. You figure those two things out, you'll have no problem with flux core, and obviously if you have any problems, go find an instructor and they'll help you out.